A few months back, we talked about the four agreements. The four agreements are these ways that you can live your life to reduce suffering. The book is written by Don Miguel Reese. My sister and I were recently talking about one of these agreements. The second one, don't take things personally. And even though we have been well into our spiritual and emotional and mental and physical healing journey, this still comes up for us. So we thought it would be valuable to have more of a conversation as we help coach each other through this agreement. Welcome to the Be Your Own Life Coach podcast, where you master your mind and coach your own comeback. You are the hero. You are the guide, and you will learn to architect your life from the inside. I'm your host, Britannia Stowe, joined by my sister and co-host, Anike Wilder. Enjoy the show. Anike, welcome.
Thanks. I'm excited. Yeah, I thought the actual words of it were don't take anything personally.
Ooh, it is don't take anything personally. What did I say?
Don't take things personally. Not to correct you, but I think there's a difference
Mm,
in the agreement saying, I think I'm trying to remember correctly that
yeah, I
don't
have
take
it pulled
anything.
up. If I would just, read what I have in front of
No, it's
me.
okay. No, I think that's the biggest challenge is because I can say I successfully don't take things personally. There's lots of
Mhm.
things I don't take personally. Like if
Mhm.
a stranger on the side of the road was like, "Ew," when they looked at me, I'd be like, "Okay." Like I
How
wouldn't.
often does that happen?
It doesn't. I'm just saying like or if somebody was kind of rude at work, I really don't take that personally. So there are things I don't take personally, but then I've noticed recently that there are things that I do take personally. And so I'm having a hard time going from like the other side of fully committing to don't take anything personally. And so I'm trying to troubleshoot like why am I taking accountability for certain things? And I noticed it's mostly from the people that I care about the most.
It always is. It
Yeah.
always is, right? It's, you know, it would be, I think, actually pretty rare and surprising if you cared that stranger said ew when you walked by, because that's silly. They don't know you. So it's easy to go, I'm not taking that personally. Maybe they're having a bad day, right? It's easy to shake that off. But when it's people that you see every day, you spend the most time with, that you have intimate relationships with, we have these expectations that they should know us almost better than we know ourselves. And we hold not just them, but ourselves to this higher standard. So when we are triggered or something comes up or we take something personally, it can really knock the wind out of our sails.
Yeah, I think an example is people won't take anything personally from me as well that aren't close to me. So if I say something that might be offensive, let's just use a really good example of maybe it's not something like what you say, it's that you cut somebody off. Like interrupting can be very offensive to depending on who you talk to. Like I know talking to you and other women, often we cut each other off. And as far as I'm aware, we're not offending each other because we're just like excited in the moment. But there might be other types of personalities where I will cut them off. And because I'm very fast and I kind of jump to conclusions and conversations. So I'm like, oh yeah, I get what you're saying because blah blah blah. And but if I do that at work, they're gonna just be like, oh, that's Anike, it's not a big deal. We're not close or anything. But if I do that to like my husband, he doesn't like to be interrupted, then it's different. And so then I'm living one reality where I don't seem to get called out for interrupting because I'm not close to these people. So I'm living this reality of like, oh, it's okay to cut people off, like to interrupt them. But then in my own home, my husband's like, I really don't like when you interrupt. Like it's disrespectful and so I'm working on that and it's a good conversation that we've had to not be interrupting. But why is it that I'm like, well, you know me, babe, like I don't mean anything by it, and then I become defensive. So I took it personally that he was hurt by me interrupting and I'm the offender. And then I
Mm-hmm.
took it personal that he was upset and then I go into like victim mentality and I think like why, like, don't you know me? I would never do this on purpose. I would never intentionally hurt you. Like, and then it just spirals. And then I'm in all in my head about how I took something personally when he wasn't necessarily upset. He was just saying, "Hey, I really don't like to be interrupted." And that's just an example of how it could happen. But then it just spirals. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, it's a really great example, but I have to admit, when you said when someone cuts you off, I immediately thought about traffic and driving. And, that just goes to show that even though we're talking about this topic, my mind goes somewhere. I'm listening, I'm paying attention. I know what we're talking about. We're talking about not taking anything personally, but my mind goes somewhere else. And so this is really a good example of how we, even as two blood sisters who are only a few years apart, can look at the world completely different. And language means something completely different to each person. And so I find it interesting that you brought up this analogy of cutting people off because that's something my husband and I also battle, but it's on the reverse. My husband often cuts me off when I'm speaking. And it isn't because he's necessarily excited about what I have to say, it's because he's done listening. And I'll say, okay, so yeah, so this is what happened for my day. And I'll just be going through it. And I'm a bit verbose. And I like to talk a lot and share a lot. And it really pulls my husband out of his comfort zone. And so he'll cut me off to say, okay, got it. You had a good day. Glad. Okay, awesome. Let's move on. And it hurts my feelings that you cut me off. So let's talk about this is a great example. There is a open wound there. This is why we are triggered, right? It's because this is not the first time this has happened. This is not really that the cutting off necessarily that's upsetting us, right? It's because this action or what your husband is doing is, or what you are doing to your husband is rubbing up against an open wound that probably stems from childhood.
Yeah, I agree. I think everything that we are as adults is because of the childhood that we had, for sure. I think another example that is very prominent for me is how men sometimes just have grumpy days?
Sometimes.
Yeah, and they are allowed to have grumpy days, right? Like they
Mhm.
are allowed to wake up on the wrong side of the bed. That is their choice.
Prerogative. Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally fine. I have no problem with that. At the same time, when my husband maybe he's just hungry, maybe he's not feeling well, maybe his back hurts, maybe he's hot because he's mowing the lawn. But if I see that his face looks grumpy, I immediately am like, what did I do? And it may have
Mm.
nothing to do with me. And he reminds me all the time. Like sometimes I'm just grumpy. Do you ever think like has nothing to do with you? So don't take anything personally. But I still like almost every time I have to catch myself like, why do I think it's my fault? Like I'm looking at him like, oh no, I offended him. He's mad at me. And then I get worried that, there's going to be a long conversation later or something. And so but sometimes it has nothing to do with me.
Well, I would say not just sometimes, almost all the time. It has nothing to do with you. Because even if you did do something that may have triggered something in your husband, he is responsible for how he chooses to respond, how he chooses to show up. So I think we, need to let go of that ownership of how our spouses feel. But at first, I want to validate that as a woman, as a very loving and nurturing woman, we feel a responsibility for our loved ones. And it's not just do they have food or are they comfortable, but it's, are they having a good day? Are they having a good time? Are they feeling loved? Are they feeling supported? And so sometimes we kind of cross that line. So I just want to validate that this is completely normal. And I still go through the same thing. I often am very triggered by what my husband says. And even down the line, like days later, I go, that was really silly. Like, I don't know why I took that so personally. Like, that's my husband being my husband. But in the moment, you can feel so raw. So let me ask you, Annika, when that happens, when your husband's having a grumpy day and see that look on his face, what's the first thought that comes to mind?
I just think, okay, I did something, and then I start going through my day or the day before or the 2 days before and think like, is there something that I did that may have been offensive? Like, did I interrupt? Was I disrespectful? Was I like, did I not say something the right way? Like, I don't know. Like, I will go through the list and literally try to figure out what it is that I did to cause his discomfort or grumpiness.
Before ever asking him a question?
Right. This is all in my head.
Right. And so you go down this road and you end up kind of spiraling, even with that initial thought. But, what is the next thought after you've gone through and you've said, okay, what have I done? What is the next thought that kind of comes up when you're going through your Rolodex of possible things you could have possibly done to possibly affect your husband?
So I think two paths happen. One path is I actually find something that I think would be offensive,
Mm.
and then my heart starts racing, and then I start realizing I need to put on my big girl pants and go apologize. And sometimes I do, and sometimes I'll go up to him and be like, "Hey, is now a good time to talk? I just wanted to apologize for doing this thing." And this is just a shot in the dark. I don't actually know if this is why he's upset, but I'll apologize for it. And honestly, sometimes it is true. Sometimes I actually have hurt his feelings and I actually did figure out what it is and it turns into a productive conversation. So
Mm.
that's one path that works out where I'm like, okay, I am taking accountability. There is something that I did do that's hurtful and I apologize and we move on. But the other path, which I think actually happens more often, is I will then start thinking I'll get defensive and I'll start thinking like, well, I don't think I did anything wrong. I'm doing my best. And, he can just be grumpy if he wants to. That is his choice. I'm gonna go live my life. And then I have an internal attitude and I'm
Mm.
not showing empathy. The first scenario where I feel like I need to apologize, there may be some empathy there, but on the other scenario, I I I spiral and then I get defensive and then I have no empathy and then I stop thinking about his needs and I totally just internalize it and be like, well, I'm just gonna go do my thing while he's grumpy for the day. And if he's grumpy, then he should talk to me.
I laugh because I have these same thoughts. 100%. I am like visualizing my relationship with my husband. And I think it's completely normal. The pendulum swings, right? We have our experience. We're wise. We have all this life experience, and we can look back through our lives and go, okay, yes, I know I probably offended him here, and I could own that. And I know in the past he's brought up when I've done this, it can be hurtful. So you have that wisdom, and that can really work out. But also, your past experience is that yes, sometimes he's grumpy and you don't know why. But instead of asking clarifying questions, you actually go too far the other way and you get this attitude and get a little internally defensive, right? So, what do you think we could do that could help break that pattern of internally spiraling and having these conversations in your head?
I think, first being curious is like what you always say, like go down this path and maybe there is something you need to apologize for. And I think I'm in the beginnings of figuring this out and trying to go down these paths, but I think there's an alternative path or a better way to go with like the attitude side of things. Because really, if he was upset and it had nothing to do with me, like maybe he literally was just not feeling well, then instead of thinking about myself and becoming defensive and taking things personally, I could just go to him and show up to him as a supportive wife and just give him a hug and be like, can I get you some water? Or like, are you feeling okay? And just
Mm-hmm.
ask questions instead of just going in my head. Because then the more time I spend in my head, the more likely I'm going to blurt out later and it's not going to come out right.
Yeah.
Like, you've been grumpy at me all day. And then he's not feeling, heard or seen, or like I have no empathy towards like the pain that he might have for sleeping wrong or something.
Mm-hmm. And it's hard to do that. It's hard to stop in the moment when you're tired, when your needs aren't being met, when your bucket isn't full, right? So I think it's also important to acknowledge that when you are in kind of this fight or flight, this is usually when things spiral. But if you can be self-aware enough to be like, wait a sec, what am I mirroring right now? Because we're mirrors of each other. So if we find that we're like, oh my gosh, my husband's being all fussy again because of blah, 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 maybe there's actually something internally that we are dealing with that maybe we're not feeling loved, we're not feeling enough. And so when we see someone not showing up, we all of a sudden like turn it. So I would say it's important to acknowledge that we're human and we're not always going to show up and be our best selves. But if we can try and be self-aware enough to go, okay, clearly something is off. I don't know what it is. Be curious, like you said. One of my favorite things to do is because my husband's a physical touch person, is I go up to him and usually he is sitting on the couch when this happens or he'll be sitting on the ottoman, or maybe he'll be in bed. But I get low. Instead of standing over him, I kneel down and I place my hand on his leg and I look up at him and I go, how are you doing? Are you doing okay? And usually that will diffuse everything. I won't get everything. He won't necessarily open up and tell me what I want to know because as women, we need all the details, but it will be enough for him to feel not attacked. Right? Because when you approach your husband from a standing, overpowering, even if you're saying, like, hey, what's going on with you? It could feel very abrasive. So
Yeah.
coming in, I don't want to say submissive, but just from a very like calming, like loving space can help them feel safe to go, I just don't feel good. And then see if they want to talk about it any further. Just that should keep you from spiraling and taking things personally.
I think that's super powerful, actually, because my counselor years ago told me that there's four types of ego: the child ego, the parent ego, the adult ego, and the what was the other one? Parent ego, adult ego, child ego. I can't remember. There was another one. And then there's soul dominion.
Mhm.
And oftentimes people go into parent ego. And so if you're towering over them, you would likely be in the parent ego where you're acting like a mom. And then that
Mm.
will put your husband or partner or whoever into the child ego, which then they'll complain and throw fits and become defensive, just like children do. And so you going low is basically showing like, I'm not going to tower over you. I'm not going to be a parent ego. In fact, I'm okay with letting you lead in this moment and be in your masculine, and maybe he needs to feel in control because people in their child ego don't feel like they have any control, and then
Mhm.
parent egos try to take control excessively, and then there's an adult ego where there's just like no feeling, it's all facts. And I can't remember the other one, but these are all super important to understand. And men, I was just talking to my husband about this, men will break away from their moms when they're like in their teens. And
Mhm.
they don't want to be parented anymore. They want to be a man. And often moms will continue to parent, and they are going through biological changes in their body and in their mind where they want to become more of a man and don't want to be parented anymore. And so in their teens and then in their early 20s, they literally break away. Sometimes they don't really have like a mama's boy a relationship anymore. If they're truly like masculine, it's normal for them to break away, go into the wilderness, learn how to survive type of thing. That's part of their manhood. So anytime a woman is in their parent ego trying to mother their spouse, it is triggering and there will be a rebellion from that spouse.
I'm so glad you brought up the egos. I think it's really important to go there because as husband and wife, or boyfriend, girlfriend, we emulate the behaviors of our parents before us. And if you already have children that you're nurturing and taking care of, it is very easy when you see someone in a vulnerable state to step into that parent ego. And it's not so that you can be controlling, it is just kind of a default that you're operating. And that's what I think is so important to call out on this podcast is we're trying to take you out of default. We're trying to take you out of this not thinking and just going along your day and being reactive. We're trying to build some self-awareness, build that emotional EQ like we talked about last episode, so that you can actually create real change.
hmm And the thing about like getting defensive and spiraling is I most likely was in my child ego. So if we explore the childhood part of me, like, okay, what part of like what part of Dan's face of him just being who he is, my husband, and he is not like he didn't do anything wrong. But what about that is triggering my child ego inside? And I'm so glad we're doing this because as we're talking, things already have come up, and sometimes you just need to troubleshoot like out loud. I recommend anyone talk to their siblings or friends about this. But I something came up was remember how we would sit in church and we would be goofing off, and dad would look at us with a very stern, like, I am going to beat you if you do not be quiet kind of
Mhm.
look. And he would
Mhm.
snap so loud to get us to like cut it out and behave. And those types of looks, the like, I'm disappointed in you looks, I think
Mhm.
is what often is portrayed on Dan's face, whether he means to or not. But I think it
Mhm.
might remind me of dad. And so then immediately I'm like, I just let my dad down. And I, for some reason, have this level of like, I need to be the perfect daughter for him. I think I don't know if our parents had high expectations, but I definitely perceived them as very high and thought I had to be perfect or I would let him down because he was very verbal about saying, you've disappointed me or you've let
Mhm.
me down or he would say those things with that face. And so I
Mhm.
think the faces of the grumpiness are triggering those, maybe.
So what I'm hearing is your husband has RBF. Just kidding. No, I hear you. I was actually writing in my book about how dad, all he'd have to do is give me a look. And so I think it's very insightful that there is a childhood wound from, which is normal, especially between a daughter and a father. You don't want to disappoint your dad. And, I would also say that Dan is older than you. Dan also has had, more relationship experience than you. And I think that there might be a part of you that um is maybe a little unfair with yourself because you'll compare it and say, well, I have nothing to compare it to. This is all that I know. This is the only, really serious relationship. This is my only marriage. And so I think sometimes you compare yourself to your spouse, like, oh, I should know better. And I don't think that's fair either.
Yeah, that's true. I definitely, have perfectionism in me. I'm definitely hard on myself. I am very forgiving of others, and I am the last to forgive myself,
Mm,
things like that. And so I do have high standards for myself. And I think, I mean, Alison Armstrong talks about this all the time in the Queen's Code and where she teaches people about men's brain is that women compare themselves and others to the perfect person. Like it's
mm-mm.
how our brain is wired. So anytime I'm not being perfect, I get defensive and I fail and I justify my actions to protect myself because I feel like I'm not good enough if I'm not perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, that makes sense. What came up for me is when you pictured us in church and dad giving us that look and snapping, how old would you say you are in that visualization?
Oh, that's a good question. I think we were all still together, like all five kids. So at least, I don't know, maybe 10 to 12, 10, oh, maybe 9 to 11, something like that.
Like in Germany?
I think so, because I feel like we also did it a little bit in North Carolina. Because I remember the church in Germany. The chapel was upstairs. I don't
Hmm.
remember goofing off that much. I feel like I actually was a pretty obedient younger kid. I think as I became a little bit older is when I started getting a little sassier and having attitude and stuff like that.
So when you were going through puberty and have all these hormones going through you, you showed a little bit of attitude? Weird.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So I wonder if it would be helpful then to talk to, 12, 13-year-old Annika to let her know that you're not disappointed in her, that she's actually become this incredible woman and that she represents our family and makes our father proud. I wonder if there is a conversation that maybe you could have with your younger self that might help heal that wound a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big proponent of, shadow work, childhood work, talking to your old self for sure. I think I don't know exactly the age, but we can definitely start there for sure and explore that.
Yeah. The other thing that I think we should just say is that even though these things come up, doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. And I feel like it's important to call out that you will see these patterns continually repeat until you break the pattern. And so I think it's almost a gift that you've noticed that you are doing this, right? You're self-aware enough so that now you can start breaking the pattern. But I will also say this will probably happen. You're probably going to take some things personally a couple more times before you finally like work through, especially when it comes with your spouse, because there are layers here that have to be worked through.
Do you think that you also coming from the same childhood, same parents, are think you need to be perfect because maybe the consequences were too high and too scary. Like we had to do push-ups, we got, slapped around a little bit, we got yelled at. Like I didn't know what was normal. I don't know what everybody else had, but do you feel
Mhm.
like our punishments were too much for us to now like, and does that affect us? And does that make us want to be perfect? Because if we make a mistake, it's too hurtful if we
Yeah,
do.
absolutely. Absolutely. If I look back on my childhood, I felt like, first of all, I want to give our parents some grace. I think they did the best that they could and they loved us very much. And they did not have a rule book and often were on their own traveling with the military, did not have a great family support system to help lead the way. So I think they did a wonderful job, though it was not always maybe fair. And when you have five kids and five different personalities, you actually have to treat them different, raise them different, discipline them different. And I think that was very hard. I think as we got maybe a little bit older, mom and dad realized that. Hopefully, they made their mistakes mostly on me and, made less with you and Johanna. But I do feel like that if I had felt safe to be imperfect, then I would have been vulnerable enough to come to my parents when I was going through a hard time, when I was hanging out with the wrong crowd, when things were kind of going down a really bad road for me. I think if they didn't keep this high level of perfectionism in the household, I would have felt safe to be myself a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree. And I've done some work on the mother wound. The mother wound is something that you get in childhood when your mother cannot or will not be emotionally available for you. But I haven't done any emotional work on the father wound because everything that's coming up in this conversation has to do with my dad. Our dad, because if you remember, mom, like if we spilt paint or made mistakes or we got muddy, she would just be like, "Oh, it's okay. Let's clean you up." Like I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I personally don't remember mom disciplining and getting upset when there were mistakes made.
Yeah, you're correct. I feel like mom was a safer place to explore and discover and be curious and to mess up and to play. There was a lot more play with mom.
And it makes sense because our dad had a very strict mom. So this is a generational thing. So there wasn't room for dad to make mistakes in his childhood. So I know where it comes from and there's no ill feelings. It helps me to understand, okay, I have that too.
Mm-hmm.
So he had a strict childhood. There was no room for mistakes. So that was in his programming that taught him how to be a parent of if you make mistakes, this is a no-no. It's very upsetting. It's stressful. You get in trouble or whatever it is. It's an inconvenience convenience. And so when we have to parent ourselves, and this is just coming up, I'm kind of thinking out loud, is when you go address the mother wound, you have to be your own mother. You have to comfort yourself. And so now, if we're addressing the father wound, I don't need to be my own father, but I need to parent myself. Like if I make a mistake, whether I do or not, but if I think I make a mistake, like if I see my husband's grumpy face, which is totally fine, or maybe he's not, maybe he's just hungry, but if I internalize it and think he's upset at me, then in that moment, I need to parent myself and say, it's okay. Just like I would with my kids who spill a cup of milk. It's okay. We'll clean it up. I spill stuff too. It's okay. And
Hmm.
if we do that to ourselves, then I think it will help calm our nervous systems, and the repetition of it will help us to remember that mistakes aren't the end of the world, and we're human, and we're not imperfect because we're making mistakes.
Yeah, I love that. I think definitely parenting yourself, whether you have kids or not, it's easier if you have kids because you can put yourself in that role very quickly. But think about how you would have liked your father to respond. It doesn't have to be how it has always been, right? So I think that is a really good way to work through some of that and to give yourself some grace. I will say that our dad did soften, and he is a lot more understanding of missteps and mistakes and failures. In fact, I feel very comfortable coming to my dad and saying I screwed up, and we can laugh about it. So I think it's also important that as you do some of this trauma work and work through your childhood, that you look at your parents and your siblings and those that affected you as people, as full entire humans who didn't have a book on how to parent. And that doesn't mean we excuse what happened, and it doesn't mean it didn't affect you and wasn't traumatic. But as you do some of this healing work, hopefully you can offer some forgiveness as well.
Hmm. Exactly. And I think that, he like you said has softened a ton, and I think that it's important not to place blame on your parents. You can find reasoning, you can find understanding when you explore your childhood, but the moment you put all the blame on them, resentment builds, you have to go through forgiveness, and also you're not taking accountability for your own emotions and thoughts that you're having right now as an adult. Like your childhood was a long time ago, so, yes, your parents made you, but what can you take accountability for now? So, explore that, but I caution to stay away from blaming.
I love that. And yeah, take accountability. Like you're an adult. At some point, you got to take accountability for your life.
Hmm.
Annika, I think it was so impactful for us to do this conversation about the second agreement, about not taking things personally. Any final words as we wrap up this episode?
So this is kind of my takeaways is stay curious, explore creative options in those moments where you feel triggered and you're taking things personally, because there's more than just two options. You don't want to do black and white thinking. If you find yourself only having two paths, try to create five more paths. So stay curious, explore other paths. And then I really liked what you said about kind of positioning yourself, like a physical movement of coming lower. That's giving the opportunity to, it doesn't mean you're in the child ego, but it's also giving the other person the benefit of the doubt to be in control of the situation, to share in a safe place, to be vulnerable, because they're the ones that you think have offended you, but most likely they haven't. So that's really good. And then explore your childhood, and don't blame them, but seek understanding of why you are that way. And then, of course, parent yourself in those situations. It's okay to make mistakes.
It is okay to make mistakes. Stay curious, friends. Ask questions. Don't let yourself spiral. And if you have any feedback on any other conversations or conversational episodes, please let us know. Thank you for listening. This has been another episode of the Be Your Own Life Coach podcast. If you found value in today's conversation, subscribe and share the love. And remember the teachings of Lao Tzu. When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. Until next time, trust yourself, take the wisdom, take the breath, and take the next step.